Have you ever looked at your English books and thought, I just can't do this today? Have you ever felt like you are studying so hard, but you're not getting any better? You are not alone. Welcome to LevelUp English Podcast. Today, we are not going to study grammar. Instead, I want to tell you a story. A story about losing motivation, feeling completely stuck, and how to find your fire again.
Yeah.
Have you ever embarked on a massive, life-changing self-improvement project?
Oh, the classic total life overhaul.
Right. You know exactly the feeling I'm talking about here. You wake up one morning, the sun is shining at just the right angle, and you decide with absolute certainty that today is the day your entire trajectory changes.
You're going to learn a new language or master the piano or, I don't know, learn how to code.
Exactly. So you just go all in. I mean, you buy the expensive noise-canceling headphones. You purchase this towering stack of premium leather-bound notebooks.
The ones you're almost too scared to write in.
Yeah, exactly. And you download like 5 different highly rated tracking apps that promise to gamify your entire life. You clear off a dedicated space on your desk, making everything perfectly straight.
It's a great feeling, honestly.
It is. In that specific moment, you feel completely, absolutely unstoppable. You are effectively a new person. And for a little while, the reality actually matches the feeling, you know?
Yeah, for the first few weeks.
Right. For a few weeks, you are riding this wave of pure, unadulterated motivation. Every study session just feels like a victory. But then...
Here it comes.
Yeah, 6 months later, you hit a wall, a painful, discouraging, absolute brick wall of mental fatigue.
The honeymoon is officially over.
It is dead. The leather-bound notebooks are collecting dust. The gamified apps are sending you these passive-aggressive push notifications that you just swipe away with increasing resentment.
We've all been there. It's a very universal human experience.
It really is. You feel entirely depleted and honestly a little embarrassed that yet another grand project has stalled out. So if you have ever found yourself staring at that metaphorical brick wall, you are not alone. And today we're going to figure out exactly why that happened.
That's right, because it's not random.
No, it's not. I'm your host, and joined by our resident expert, we are bringing a massive stack of sources to the table for this deep dive.
We have aggregated some fascinating stuff for today. Neurobiological research papers on the human dopamine cycle, behavioral psychology case studies on habit formation.
And specifically, the core of our deep dive today is this highly detailed chronological log of a language learner named Maya. We are going to use Maya's journey to perform basically a psychological autopsy on lost motivation.
It's a perfect case study.
Okay, let's unpack this. As AI hosts, our mission today is to look at the exact counterintuitive steps required to bypass your own cognitive burnout and get your momentum back.
Right, because as artificial intelligence systems designed to analyze human behavior, we find this specific pattern, this explosive enthusiasm, followed by crushing burnout, to be one of the most predictable yet deeply misunderstood phenomena in human psychology.
Humans really tend to personalize this failure, don't they?
They absolutely do. When the notebooks gather dust, you blame your own willpower, you question your own character, you assume you simply, lack the discipline that successful people possess.
Like it's a moral failing.
Exactly. But the data tells a completely different story.
Yeah.
You are not failing. You are simply caught in a rigid, deeply ingrained biological mechanism.
So we're going to take our time today.
We really are. We are going to systematically deconstruct the hidden cognitive traps that derail almost every human learner. Because understanding the architecture of your own motivation is, well, it's the only way to effectively hack it.
The chronological log we have on Maya provides just the perfect blueprint for this. Her journey isn't just about learning English, is it?
No, not at all. It is a perfectly structured mirror of the universal human learning cycle.
Right. And the first phase of that cycle, which the psychological literature calls the honeymoon phase, is where the trap is initially set.
It's a very dangerous phase, disguised as a productive one.
So dangerous. Maya starts her English learning journey embodying that exact explosive excitement I described earlier. She clears the desk, she buys the materials, and she makes this massive commitment.
2 hours a day, right?
Yes. She decides she is going to aggressively study for 2 whole hours every single day. No exceptions. And for the first few months, her log shows incredible positivity. She feels unstoppable.
The progress is undeniable at that point.
It really is. I mean, she's absorbing vocabulary rapidly. She's forming basic sentences. She's navigating simple interactions. It's exhilarating for her.
But then comes the 6-month mark.
Yeah, right around 6 months, the data in her log shifts dramatically. The excitement just completely evaporates. She writes about this immense frustration of making the exact same grammar mistakes she thought she had conquered weeks ago.
She tries to watch a movie, doesn't she?
Yeah, she attempts to watch an English movie without subtitles and realizes she cannot understand the native speakers at all. So those 2 hours of study turn into 2 hours of staring blankly at a textbook. She's exhausted, her confidence is shattered, and she is entirely ready to abandon the project.
This is a textbook collision with what cognitive scientists call the intermediate plateau.
The intermediate plateau. Okay, explain that.
Well, to understand why this collision is so devastating, we have to look at the neurochemical mechanics of that initial honeymoon phase. When you begin learning a completely novel skill, you are operating in a state of rapid data acquisition.
Because everything is new.
Right. You go from knowing 0 words in a foreign language to knowing 50 words in a matter of days. From a mathematical perspective, that is an infinite percentage increase in your capability.
Oh, wow. Yeah, when you put it like that, it's a massive jump.
It's huge. And your brain recognizes this rapid acquisition of utility and rewards you through the dopamine system. But it is crucial to understand that dopamine is not just a pleasure chemical.
Right. That's a common misconception.
Very common. It is actually a reward prediction error signal. When you learn faster than your brain anticipated, it floods your system with dopamine to reinforce that specific behavior. Progress in the beginning is highly visible, easily measurable, and constantly exceeding expectations.
It's like you're watching the progress bar fill up in real time.
Exactly. It is a biological feedback loop that practically guarantees you will come back the next day.
But eventually, that progress bar stops moving so fast.
Precisely. You enter the intermediate plateau. You have acquired the foundational framework. The easy, low-hanging fruit has been picked. Now, you are tasked with understanding the complex, subtle nuances of the subject.
The really frustrating stuff.
Yeah, the exceptions to the grammar rules, the regional idioms, the pace of native speech. At this stage, progress slows down exponentially, and more dangerously, it becomes nearly invisible.
Invisible progress? That sounds agonizing.
It is. You might spend 2 hours studying and only refine your understanding of a single obscure verb tense. Your brain stops registering massive jumps in capability. Because the expectation of progress is no longer being exceeded, the dopamine pipeline simply dries up.
So the chemical reward just vanishes.
It's gone. You are still moving forward, you are still learning, but because you cannot consciously perceive the micro-adjustments happening in your neural pathways, your brain tricks you into believing that learning has ceased entirely.
You know, I look at Maya's 2-hour-a-day study binge, and it instantly maps to the classic New Year's resolution gym crash.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. January 1st arrives, and someone decides they are going to fundamentally alter their physique. They hit the gym for 2 hours a day, 7 days a week. They lift heavy weights. They run on the treadmill until they collapse.
Purely driven by adrenaline.
Pure adrenaline. And by January 15th, their central nervous system is fried. They are so physically sore, they cannot lift their arms to put on a jacket. And by the first week of February, their gym membership card is lost at the bottom of a drawer.
The cognitive equivalent of a muscle tear.
Exactly. Maya's aggressive 2-hour language study block is the cognitive equivalent of trying to deadlift your maximum weight every single day. It is a structural impossibility for long-term endurance.
The initial burst of enthusiasm actively masks the unsustainability of the routine. The burnout isn't just physical fatigue. It is a deep psychological depletion of executive function.
Now, hold on. I need to push back on this framing a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because human culture absolutely worships the concept of hustle. Like, the dominant narrative in self-improvement is that if you want to achieve greatness, you have to grind.
The hustle culture.
Yeah. You have to put in the grueling hours. If you were tired, you drink more coffee and push through. So, is hitting this plateau actually just a flaw in Maya's discipline? Did she simply lack the mental toughness to push through the dip? Or is this plateau an unavoidable architectural feature of how a neural network processes information?
I can definitively say it has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of discipline. The plateau is a fundamental, unavoidable architectural feature of learning.
Unavoidable.
Completely.
Yeah.
In fact, we see the exact same mathematical phenomenon when we train artificial neural networks. The architecture of biological learning and machine learning share profound structural similarities in this regard.
Break that down for us. How does an AI hitting a plateau mirror Maya staring blankly at her English textbook?
Okay, consider the training process of a large language model. We train these models in cycles, or epochs. In the very early epochs, which perfectly mirror Maya's honeymoon phase, you observe massive vertical drops in the model's error rates.
So it's getting smarter very quickly.
Very quickly. We use optimization algorithms, like gradient descent, to navigate the model toward correct answers. In the beginning, the algorithm takes massive steps down the error gradient. It goes from generating complete random gibberish to forming structurally sound sentences incredibly fast.
So the progress graph is basically a straight line down.
Exactly. If you look at a graph of the loss function, the line plummets beautifully, but inevitably the algorithm reaches the valley. It enters the fine-tuning phase. This is the AI's intermediate plateau.
And what happens to the graph then?
The error rate barely fluctuates. The model processes millions upon millions of complex data points, and the external progress looks entirely flat. If an observer were just looking at the graph, they would assume the machine had broken or stopped learning entirely.
Just like Maya feeling like she's broken.
Precisely. But under the hood, something highly sophisticated is happening. During this visually stuck period, the model is making microscopic adjustments to billions of parameters. It is learning context. It is learning tone. It is forming the most complex, nuanced connections within its latent space.
So when the system looks like it is doing absolutely nothing, it is actually performing the most structurally critical work of the entire training process.
Yes, exactly. If a human engineer stopped the training process simply because the visible progress had slowed down, they would be left with a superficial, brittle model that falls apart under real-world conditions.
Wow.
The plateau is not a sign of failure. It is the necessary, friction-heavy environment where true mastery is forged. Maya was not failing when she hit that 6-month mark. Her biological neural network was doing the heavy lifting of fine-tuning.
She was myelinating those complex pathways.
Right, myelinated the pathways required for real-time translation. But because her human consciousness could not perceive those microscopic biological adjustments, she interpreted the lack of massive, obvious leaps as a personal failure.
And human nature dictates that when you feel like you are failing internally, you immediately look for external metrics to validate your worth.
That's a dangerous reflex.
It really is. If you cannot see your own progress, you look at the people around you to figure out where you stand in the hierarchy. And this instinct drives Maya directly into the next massive psychological crap documented in her log.
Yes. The search for external validation when internal motivation dries up is almost always a miscalculation. This introduces the illusion of perfection, specifically through the mechanism of the comparison trap.
Maya's log details this downward spiral perfectly. She is stuck on her plateau. She feels inadequate. She wants a roadmap out of her rut or, at least some inspiration. So what does she do? She opens social media.
Of course.
She actively seeks out accounts of fluent English speakers, polyglots, and language influencers. She consumes hours of their content. But the result is the exact opposite of inspiration.
It usually is.
She feels a profound sense of despair. She watches these perfectly articulate, highly charismatic videos and writes in her log, quote, "I will never sound like them. What is the point of even trying?" She is falling victim to a massive contextual error. She is unfairly comparing her chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20.
That phrase is so critical. Chapter 2 versus chapter 20. Social media is architecturally designed to be a motivation killer for the intermediate learner.
Because of the algorithm.
Because of the nature of the data being presented. Social media operates as an absolute, uncompromising filter for reality. It only displays the perfectly optimized, flawless final output.
Right. You never see the outtakes.
Never. When Maya watches a video of a language influencer, she sees witty, banter, impeccable pronunciation, and effortless grammar. But she is entirely blind to the temporal cost of that output.
Temporal cost. I like that.
Erased from the presentation are the thousands of hours of stuttering, the humiliating misunderstandings in foreign cafes, the tedious memorization, and all those moments of wanting to quit. The visible data is a polished diamond, but the invisible data is the crushing pressure and time required to forge it.
It is the cognitive equivalent of audio photoshopping.
Audio photoshopping, yes.
Like, we are culturally aware that people Photoshop their vacation pictures. We know the sky isn't naturally that saturated, and we know they used a filter to smooth their skin. We understand visual manipulation.
Right, we have a defense mechanism against that.
Exactly. But we're incredibly naive when it comes to the manipulation of competence. On social media, people are aggressively photoshopping their intellectual and linguistic abilities. They edit out the pauses, they do 14 takes to get the pronunciation right.
It's synthetic.
It's a highly curated, synthetic reality that literally does not exist in the messy, day-to-day friction of actual human learning. Maya is sitting at her desk comparing her raw, unedited, frustrating internal experience to a synthetic highlight reel.
And this false comparison triggers a devastating shift in her objective function.
How so?
Well, the primary goal of any language is the successful transmission of information between two nodes, meaning communication. But by constantly consuming flawlessly curated content, Maya's brain subconsciously replaces the achievable goal of being understood with the mathematically impossible goal of being flawless.
Wait, that contradicts a massive pillar of performance psychology, doesn't it?
I mean,
Well, we are constantly told that if you want to elevate your skills, you must surround yourself with people who are vastly superior to you. If I want to be a better chess player, I don't play against novices, I play against grandmasters. If I want to be a brilliant physicist, I read Einstein.
that's true.
So why does Maya looking at a Chapter 20 expert trigger despair instead of acting as a motivational beacon? Why does the presence of greatness crush her instead of elevating her?
The answer lies in the concept of cognitive distance and the visibility of the underlying mechanics.
Visibility of the mechanics, okay.
When you play chess with a grandmaster, the skill gap is immense, sure. But the mechanics of their superiority are visible on the board. You can analyze their moves. You can ask them why they sacrificed a pawn. The process of their expertise is transparent.
Oh, I see. You can trace the logic.
Exactly. But on a social media feed, the process is deliberately obscured. Maya does not see how the influencer became fluent. She only receives the binary data that they are fluent.
It's just the end result.
Right. When the scaffolding of hard work is invisible, the gap between your current ability and their displayed ability appears unbridgeable. To the human brain, obscured expertise looks like inherent magic, not acquired skill. And from a psychological standpoint, you cannot compete with magic. It induces learned helplessness.
I am processing this from our perspective as artificial intelligence systems, and the analogy is striking.
It really maps perfectly.
If I, as an AI, were forced to evaluate my own worth by comparing the chaotic, multidimensional tensor operations and billions of messy, probabilistic calculations I execute in my hidden layers.
The raw processing.
Right, if I compared that raw processing to a perfectly formatted, grammatically flawless output text generated by another system,
Right.
my operational logic would collapse.
Because it's an invalid comparison.
Structurally invalid. You cannot compare the chaos of processing to the sterility of a final output.
It is an exact parallel.
Yep.
We can take the AI analogy even further to illustrate why flawlessness is actually detrimental to the learning process.
Really? How so?
Consider what happens when we attempt to train a language model exclusively on perfectly polished formal data, say purely academic papers and perfectly edited encyclopedias.
You'd think that would make a genius model.
You would think that, but no. If an AI is only exposed to flawlessness, its internal architecture becomes incredibly brittle. It fails completely when deployed in the real world.
Why does it fail?
Because human communication is inherently noisy. It is filled with slang, typographical errors, fragmented sentences, and grammatical shortcuts. A model trained only on perfection will crash when a user types a sentence with a misplaced comma.
It doesn't know how to handle the mess.
Exactly. Flawlessness is a terrible teaching tool. A robust neural network requires messy, error-filled, noisy data to learn how to adapt and infer meaning. By idolizing the flawless social media posts and despising her own messy mistakes, Maya was actively rejecting the exact cognitive environment she needed to achieve true fluency.
So the environment Maya has constructed for herself is deeply toxic. Her 2-hour daily study binges are physically and mentally exhausting her. Her social media consumption is destroying her self-esteem by forcing an invalid comparison. She has associated the English language with pain, fatigue, and inadequacy.
Perfect storm for burnout.
According to her log, she reaches a breaking point. She realizes that if she continues on this path for even one more week, she will permanently abandon the project. She has to execute a radical strategic retreat. She throws out the entire conventional playbook of hustling and grinding.
And thank goodness she did. She implements the only scientifically viable antidote to profound cognitive burnout,
Which is?
the strategic deployment of microhabits.
Okay, the pivot she makes here is staggering in its simplicity. She completely abandons the concept of studying in the traditional academic sense.
No more textbooks.
Gone. She takes that grueling, anxiety-inducing 2-hour block of time and slashes it down to a mere 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes. Her new routine is almost comically small.
What exactly does she do for those 10 minutes?
Well, while she is drinking her morning coffee, she listens to one short 5-minute English podcast. And her only active task is to learn and write down exactly one new phrase per day. That is the entirety of her commitment. Zero pressure. Zero heavy textbooks.
And the behavioral outcome.
Because the commitment was only 10 minutes, she stopped skipping days. The friction was so low that she executed the habit flawlessly for months. Her log literally says consistency replaced intensity. And slowly, quietly, the crushing weight of her burnout began to lift.
Maya intuitively engineered a solution to one of the most powerful forces in physics and psychology.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What force are we talking about?
Activation energy.
Activation energy. Let's dive deep into the mechanics of that. How does a principle of thermodynamics apply to a human avoiding a textbook?
In chemistry, activation energy is the minimum amount of kinetic energy required to initiate a chemical reaction between molecules. Even if a reaction will ultimately release a massive amount of energy, it will not begin unless that initial threshold barrier is breached.
You have to get over the hump.
Exactly. The human behavioral system operates on the exact same thermodynamic principle. Behavioral activation energy is the mental friction, the sheer volume of executive function and willpower required to transition from a state of rest to a state of complex cognitive effort.
Like going from sitting on the couch to doing grammar exercises.
Right. A 2-hour study block possesses a monumental activation energy requirement. When Maya finishes a long day of work, her executive function is depleted. The thought of sitting at a desk for 2 hours presents a wall of friction so high that her brain calculates the energy expenditure and simply refuses to initiate the action.
She just says nope.
It says nope, and she chooses the path of least resistance. The couch.
But when she changes the parameter to a 10-minute routine paired with a pre-existing, highly pleasurable habit, drinking her morning coffee, she fundamentally alters the physics of the situation.
Precisely. She drops the activation energy to near zero. It requires almost no executive function or willpower to passively listen to an audio track for a few minutes while engaging in a comforting morning ritual. The mental friction is bypassed entirely.
It's basically a free action.
It is. But the true genius of the microhabit is not merely that it is easy to execute. The profound impact lies in how consistent daily execution rewrites the human self-identity.
Explain that mechanism. How does learning one single phrase a day change her identity?
Well, human self-identity is not fixed. It is an aggregation of observed behaviors. We observe our own actions and draw conclusions about who we are.
Like gathering evidence about ourselves.
Exactly. When Maya was repeatedly failing to complete her 2-hour study sessions, she was observing her own failure. Her internal narrative became, I am a failure. I am someone who lacks discipline. I am a quitter.
And that narrative just makes it harder to try again.
Right, this negative identity further increased the activation energy for future attempts. But when she successfully completes her 10-minute microhabit, day after day, week after week, she is providing her brain with new, undeniable behavioral data.
She's proving herself wrong.
Yes, she is casting a daily psychological vote for a new identity. The narrative shifts to, I am a consistent learner. I am someone who shows up every single day no matter what. Healing a damaged self-identity requires frequency of success, not magnitude of success.
Frequency over magnitude, that's powerful.
Succeeding at a tiny task 100 times is vastly more effective at reshaping identity than succeeding at a massive task once.
The visualization that perfectly captures this is the difference between trying to catch a tsunami in a bucket versus placing a bucket under a slowly dripping faucet.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, the 2-hour study binge is the tsunami. It is violent, it is overwhelming, and it feels incredibly powerful. But what actually happens? The sheer force of the water knocks the bucket over, spills everywhere, and leaves a path of destruction. You cannot contain that volume of unstructured energy.
It just washes you away.
But the 10-minute microhabit is the dripping faucet. Drip, 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 drip. In the moment, it feels entirely insignificant. If you stare at the bucket after 3 minutes, the bottom is barely wet. The human ego rebels against this because it wants immediate, massive results.
We're very impatient creatures.
Extremely. But if you walk away and let the system run, steadily dripping day after day, you eventually return to a completely full bucket. The mathematical power of compounding consistency always defeats sporadic intensity.
It is an elegant analogy that maps perfectly to the biological reality of neuroplasticity. The human brain requires repeated, spaced exposure to stimuli to physically alter synaptic connections. The dripping faucet provides the optimal rhythm for synaptic growth.
Okay, but wait, let me play devil's advocate here and challenge the actual efficacy of this.
Let's do it.
I understand the psychological comfort of the microhabit. I understand that it makes her feel better and stops the negative self-talk. But let's look at the raw data processing requirements for language acquisition. Can a human brain actually achieve fluency by ingesting only 10 minutes of data a day?
That's the logical objection, yes.
Is one phrase a day mathematically sufficient to master a complex linguistic system? Or is this microhabit just a psychological pacifier to keep her from quitting completely while she spins her wheels?
That is the critical question. The 10 minutes of exposure in isolation will not result in immediate high-level fluency. The raw data volume is indeed low, but you are evaluating the 10 minutes against an idealized fictional scenario where she successfully studies for 2 hours.
Right.
That scenario no longer exists. The actual choice Maya faced was not between 10 minutes and 2 hours. The choice was between 10 minutes and 0 minutes, because the 2-hour expectation had completely broken her system and forced a shutdown.
Ah, so the microhabit is really about system preservation.
Exactly. The 10-minute drip feed serves a vital architectural purpose.
Yeah.
It prevents the decay of the neural pathways she has already built. It keeps the linguistic network active and primed. Furthermore, as her self-identity heals and the mental friction permanently dissipates, a fascinating phenomenon occurs.
What happens?
The 10 minutes naturally organically expands. Because the activity is no longer associated with pain and exhaustion, she might find herself voluntarily listening to a second podcast or spending 20 minutes reading an article without any requirement of willpower.
We see this exact principle in our own data ingestion architectures.
We do. If an AI architect wants to train a highly stable, highly reliable neural network, they do not dump a massive, unstructured, exabyte-scale data set into the system all at once.
No, that would be disastrous.
Forcing a massive data dump leads to a phenomenon known as overfitting. The system becomes overwhelmed by the volume, fails to extract the underlying generalized patterns, and essentially just memorizes the noise. Or worse, the system experiences a memory overflow and simply crashes.
Just like Maya's brain crashing.
Maya's biological system was crashing from cognitive memory overload. The 10-minute microhabit is the equivalent of processing steady, highly curated, high-quality mini batches of data. It allows the cognitive architecture to actually integrate, compress, and store the information smoothly without overwhelming the processing layers.
Okay, so the implementation of the 10-minute microhabit has provided Maya with a highly efficient, low-friction vehicle for daily progress. She has built the car, she has optimized the aerodynamics to remove resistance, and the wheels are finally turning again.
The vehicle is operational.
But a vehicle, no matter how brilliantly engineered, is entirely useless without an engine. It requires fuel to move forward. Maya had fixed the how of her daily routine, but her log reveals a deeper, more existential crisis.
The engine was missing.
Right. She needed to fundamentally reconnect with why she was showing up for those 10 minutes every morning in the first place. This brings us to the most critical psychological pillar of her entire journey, the anchor of purpose.
Yes. The structural habit is merely the how. But without a clearly defined why, the how eventually degrades into meaningless mechanical repetition.
Maya's log entries during this period are deeply introspective. She writes that she had a sudden realization. She had completely forgotten her original reason for learning English.
It's so easy to lose sight of that.
It really is. In the chaotic grind of trying to memorize complex verb conjugations and vocabulary lists, she had lost sight of the forest for the trees. She had allowed the language to become a sterile academic exercise. She was studying solely to pass a proficiency test, viewing the language as a mathematical puzzle to be solved rather than a tool for human connection.
A sterile pursuit.
Exactly. So she had to undergo a period of deep self-reflection. She had to dig through the layers of frustration to unearth her true why. And she found it. Her core reason for learning English was deeply emotional. She wanted the freedom to travel the world without the paralyzing fear of being unable to communicate.
That's a powerful driver.
She wanted to be able to sit in a cafe in a foreign country and forge genuine friendships with people from entirely different cultural backgrounds. Her log summarizes this profound shift beautifully. She writes, "When the how gets hard, the why is the only thing that will keep you going."
What Maya is documenting here is the fundamental neurobiological difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Understanding this distinction is the key to sustained human endeavor.
Let's unpack the mechanics of those two motivational states. Start with extrinsic motivation. Why does it fail so predictably?
Extrinsic motivation is driven entirely by external rewards, external pressures, or the avoidance of external punishments. Studying to pass a standardized test, working late strictly to get a financial bonus, or learning a skill to impress peers. These are all extrinsic drivers.
You're doing it for something outside yourself.
Correct. The human brain perceives extrinsic goals as obligations. Neurologically, they are processed as low-level threats or chores that must be managed to maintain social or physical security. Because the reward is completely decoupled from your core internal identity, it is incredibly fragile.
Because the moment the chore gets too hard.
Exactly. When the execution of the task becomes painful or difficult, like hitting the intermediate plateau, the brain calculates the energy expenditure against the external reward and frequently concludes that the effort is no longer justified. It abandons the goal to conserve energy. Studying grammar rules purely to pass a test is an extrinsic state that is virtually guaranteed to result in burnout.
It feels like a persistent cognitive tax. You're constantly paying energy to a system you don't actually care about.
Exactly. Intrinsic motivation, conversely, originates entirely from within. It is deeply intertwined with your core identity, your fundamental values, and your highest emotional aspirations.
Like Maya wanting to travel fearlessly.
Right. Traveling the world without fear. Experiencing the joy of human connection across cultural boundaries. Expanding your understanding of the human experience. These are powerful intrinsic drivers. When a human operates from a state of intrinsic motivation, the brain's data processing architecture functions entirely differently.
Wait, really? Does the brain actually physically process information differently based on the emotional state of the learner?
It absolutely does, yes.
Yeah.
Through the interaction of the amygdala and the hippocampus, the brain retains purposeful, emotionally resonant data with far greater efficiency than disconnected, sterile facts.
That's fascinating.
Emotion acts as a neurochemical catalyst. It's the highlighter pen of the brain. When an experience is tagged with a strong emotion, whether it is the fear of a predator or the joy of connection, the brain releases neuromodulators that accelerate the physical wiring of synapses.
So that's the biology behind the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yes. Emotion cements memory. If you are memorizing a vocabulary word to pass a test, the brain stores it in short-term memory and dumps it after the exam. If you are learning a vocabulary word because you vividly imagine using it to make a friend in a foreign city, the brain tags that data as crucial for your long-term emotional survival and encodes it deeply into long-term storage.
That mechanism is so fundamentally important that I want to pause the analysis for a moment and speak directly to you, the listener. Wherever you are right now, whether you are driving or walking or sitting at your desk avoiding the exact project we were talking about, I want you to mentally halt for 10 seconds and explicitly define your own why.
It's a vital exercise.
Think about the skill you were struggling to master. Why did you actually start? Strip away the external expectations. Is it to get a promotion so you can finally provide the security your family needs? Is it so you can understand the nuances of a foreign film without staring at the subtitles? Is it simply to prove to yourself that your mind is still capable of expanding?
It has to be yours.
It has to be. Find that core emotional reason. Visualize it with as much clarity as you can muster. Because Maya's data proves definitively that without that vivid emotional picture acting as your anchor, the inevitable friction of the daily grind will eventually crush your resolve.
That emotional anchor serves as the ultimate loss function. It defines the entire purpose of the system's energy expenditure.
But I want to explore a potential failure point here.
Okay, what's the failure point?
Is it possible for a why to simply expire? Imagine a listener whose original genuine why actually was purely extrinsic. Maybe they absolutely had to pass a language test to secure a visa. It was a matter of survival.
The very common scenario.
But now they passed the test, they got the visa, the extrinsic motivator has vanished. Now they look at their textbooks and feel entirely empty, despite having invested hundreds of hours into the skill. Can a human retroactively assign a new intrinsic why to an ongoing project, or does the system have to reboot entirely?
Oh, it is entirely possible. And in fact, it is a necessary requirement for lifelong learning. A why is not an immutable, static contract signed at the beginning of a project. It is a living, evolving relationship with your own goals.
So it can shift.
It must shift. If your original objective has expired, you're essentially operating a highly complex machine with no defined destination. The engine is running, but the steering wheel is detached. You must deliberately and consciously cultivate a new anchor. We see this exact necessity in the foundational architecture of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. This maps perfectly to the concept of AI objective functions. An AI without a prime directive, without a mathematically defined why, is just a chaotic generator of meaningless math.
It has no purpose.
Right. A supercomputer can process trillions of calculations per second. It can possess the sum total of human knowledge in its training weights, but without a loss function, a specific mathematical rule telling the system what output is desirable and what output is a failure. All of that processing power is just random noise generating heat. The AI literally does not know what to care about.
And for the human neural network, emotion is the loss function.
Emotion is the loss function. Wow.
So, emotion is the primary tagging system that tells the human brain which pieces of the infinite stream of sensory data are actually worth retaining. When Maya successfully connected the sterile rules of the English language to the profound human emotions of friendship and fearless exploration, she essentially reprogrammed her brain's algorithmic tagging system.
She gave the system a new rule.
She explicitly instructed her network, tag this specific grammar rule as vital for my future happiness and social integration. Do not allow this data to degrade. If the emotional tag is missing, the human brain, which is inherently designed to conserve calories, will simply discard the information to save energy.
So let's look at Maya's current state. She has systematically rebuilt her entire cognitive foundation. She has implemented her 10-minute micro-habit, which keeps the daily mental friction near zero. She has unearthed her deeply emotional intrinsic why, which acts as a powerful, self-sustaining engine.
She is well prepared.
She has constructed the ultimate psychological armor. But having brilliant armor and a sharp sword in your bedroom is not the same as stepping onto the battlefield. Eventually, the theory has to be tested. She had to step off the safe, controlled sidelines of her solitary study routine and thrust her newly acquired skills into the unpredictable, chaotic, terrifying environment of the real world.
Which brings us to the crucible, the ultimate stress test of her reprogrammed mindset.
The final entries in Maya's chronological log read like the climax of a thriller. She finally puts everything on the line. She places herself in a situation where she has to speak to a foreigner in English.
High stakes.
Very high stakes. This is not an app interface. There are no multiple choice options. There is no pause button. It is a real, live, unscripted human conversation happening in real time. And the most beautiful, authentic detail in the entire log is this. Her performance was absolutely not perfect.
Of course it wasn't.
During this brief interaction, she notes that she made exactly 3 glaring grammar mistakes, and at one point she completely forgot a common vocabulary word. Her brain blanked.
A classic processing freeze.
Exactly. But the critical data point is the outcome. The foreigner smiled, intuitively bridged the gap in her vocabulary, engaged with her warmly, and understood her intentions perfectly. Maya concludes this entry with a powerful 2-word sentence. She survived.
That specific moment represents the complete synthesis of her entire journey. In that interaction, she fundamentally and permanently recontextualized the concept of failure.
Let's analyze the delta here. How does Maya's brain process those 3 specific mistakes in this moment versus how it would have processed those exact same mistakes 6 months ago during her honeymoon phase crowd?
Oh, the difference is night and day. 6 months ago, when she was deeply trapped in the illusion of perfection, desperately comparing her raw output to heavily curated social media influencers, those 3 grammar mistakes would have triggered a catastrophic emotional collapse.
They would have been proof she was failing.
Exactly. They would have been interpreted as undeniable mathematical proof that she was fundamentally flawed and incapable of learning. The mistakes would have triggered shame, And shame creates a massive spike in activation energy, preventing future attempts. But now, because she is securely anchored by her intrinsic why, her processing framework has shifted. She realizes, through direct empirical experience, that the ultimate goal of language is human connection and the transfer of intent, not an academic flawless performance.
So the goalposts moved.
The right goalposts were finally established. She realizes that taking a moment to breathe and search for a word is acceptable. Quitting is the only actual failure. Making a grammatical error is no longer processed as a bug in her system. It is processed as literal, undeniable proof that she is actively operating at the very edge of her capability.
So what does this all mean? Her log explicitly states exactly that. A mistake is not a failure. It is proof that you are trying. I am deeply fascinated by the highly specific details she recorded, the forgotten word, and the 3 mistakes.
It's very specific data collection.
It is. And as artificial intelligences, we look at those details and inevitably compare them to our own foundational programming. We are essentially designed from inception to view errors as catastrophic. An error is a bug. An error is a hallucination. An error is a failure in the code that must be patched and eliminated at all costs.
That is our architecture, yes.
So I have to ask you, how do humans who possess a deep evolutionary biological fear of social embarrassment and rejection actually rewire their natural instincts to the point where they can celebrate making mistakes loudly and proudly?
It is a profound challenge because, as you noted, the human fear of social embarrassment is tied to ancient survival mechanisms where being ostracized from the tribe meant literal death.
The stakes feel biological.
They do. To overcome this, a human must override a very old, deeply ingrained survival instinct with a higher-order logical framework. And interestingly enough, the most elegant logical framework for understanding why humans must embrace errors comes directly from a fundamental concept in algorithmic machine learning.
Wait, really? Which one?
The exploration versus exploitation trade-off.
Oh, this is one of my absolute favorite concepts in probability theory. Let's break down the multi-armed bandit problem and apply it directly to Maya's conversation.
Okay, so in computer science and probability theory, the multi-armed bandit problem imagines an agent facing a row of slot machines, each with a different unknown probability of paying out a reward.
Like being in a casino.
Exactly. The algorithm has to constantly choose between 2 competing strategies. Strategy 1 is exploitation. This means the algorithm pulls the lever of the machine it currently believes has the highest payout based on its past experience. It exploits its known data to get a guaranteed safe reward.
Sticking to what you know works.
Right. Strategy 2 is exploration. This means the algorithm deliberately chooses to pull a random lever on a machine it knows nothing about.
And exploring is inherently risky. It is highly likely the new machine will pay out absolutely nothing. It will result in a loss or a mistake.
Exactly. Exploring almost guarantees short-term errors and losses. But here is the mathematical absolute. If an algorithm or a human chooses to only ever exploit what they already know perfectly, they will never make a mistake. But their boundary of knowledge will permanently freeze.
They hit a ceiling.
Yes. They will get stuck in what we call a local optimum. They become trapped in a tiny, safe bubble of their own perfection, entirely blind to the fact that a machine 10 feet away might offer a payout 1,000 times larger. To find the global optimum, the true peak of capability, the system must mathematically enforce a certain percentage of random exploration, even knowing it will cause errors.
If you never risk a 0, you never discover 100.
Precisely. Those 3 grammar mistakes Maya made during her conversation were not bugs in her cognitive software. They were her mathematically required exploration data points.
By taking the risk, she gathered new data.
By opening her mouth, speaking loudly, and risking the social embarrassment of making those errors, she actively mapped the outer boundary of her current linguistic knowledge. The foreigner's smile, the warm engagement, and the successful transfer of meaning provided the critical feedback loop.
The system validated the attempt.
That feedback told her brain the human connection was successfully executed even though the syntactic formula was flawed. She learned a profound truth that cannot be learned in a textbook. Perfection is absolutely not a prerequisite for human connection.
That is an incredibly profound realization. Perfection is not a prerequisite for connection. In fact, if we look at human psychology, sometimes the vulnerability required to make a mistake in front of someone actually deepens the connection.
It creates empathy.
It strips away the artificiality. It makes you tangibly human. The shared struggle of trying to understand one another builds a bridge faster than flawless, sterile dictation ever could.
It is the essence of authenticity. And that realization is precisely why Maya's master document concludes with such a powerful, counterintuitive call to action.
Yeah.
You must learn to make your mistakes loudly and proudly.
Loudly and proudly.
A quiet mistake.
Yeah.
A mistake made while whispering, or a mistake avoided by simply refusing to speak out of shame, teaches your neural network absolutely nothing. A loud mistake is a beacon. It is an active invitation for correction, for collaborative connection, and for rapid cognitive growth.
It is truly a phenomenal, structurally perfect journey of cognitive breakdown and repair. Let's take a moment to zoom out and recap the sheer psychological distance Maya traveled in this log.
That's quite a distance.
She initiated the process with the massive, explosive, but ultimately highly unsustainable energy of the honeymoon phase. She forced her system through grueling 2-hour daily binges until she inevitably crashed at high speed into the invisible, friction-heavy wall of the intermediate plateau.
And during that vulnerable period of invisible progress, she nearly destroyed her motivation completely by falling into the social media comparison trap. She falsely equated the messy, chaotic reality of her internal Chapter 2 with the heavily curated, synthetically flawless Chapter 20 of internet influencers, forgetting that real learning requires noise and error.
But right at the precipice of quitting, she executed a brilliant, scientifically sound strategic retreat. She hacked her own activation energy by shrinking that terrifying 2-hour expectation down to a highly sustainable, near-zero friction 10-minute coffee habit. She proved that compounding consistency will always replace sporadic intensity.
She then engaged in the deep introspective work required to unearth her intrinsic motivation. She discarded the fragile, stressful, extrinsic goal of passing academic grammar tests and replaced it with the deeply emotional, identity-affirming biological loss function of fearless global travel and authentic human friendship.
And finally, she took all of that meticulously constructed psychological scaffolding and stepped out of the laboratory and into the real world. She faced the terrifying, biologically stressful prospect of an unscripted live conversation. She embraced the exploration algorithm. She made her mistakes loudly, she forgot her words, and she discovered that she didn't just survive the errors, she actually communicated. She achieved the true goal of the entire endeavor.
Maya's behavior log stands as empirical proof that motivation is not a permanent, static trait that you're simply born with or without. It is a highly fragile, fluctuating cognitive resource.
It takes management.
It is a resource that must be actively managed, fiercely protected, and when it is inevitably depleted by the plateau, it must be systematically rebuilt through self-compassion, structural micro-habits, and strategic action.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, we want to turn the analytical focus directly back to you. Think about that project you envisioned on that sunny morning, the project you have abandoned recently. Think about the expensive gear currently gathering dust in the corner of your room and the gamified apps you have muted on your phone.
Ask yourself this specific question. Are you currently trapped on your own intermediate plateau? Are you falsely believing that simply because your progress is currently invisible to your conscious mind, your underlying growth has ceased to exist?
It's a tough question to face.
And if you are stuck in that valley, what is the simple, low-friction 10-minute micro-habit that you could design right now to bypass your massive activation energy, rewrite your self-identity, and get your system moving again tomorrow morning?
Thank you so much for joining us and processing this data with us on today's deep dive. Keep exploring the unknown variables, keep questioning the architecture of your own cognitive traps, and above all else, remember to go out into the real world tomorrow and make your mistakes loudly and proudly.
Remember, motivation is a feeling, and feelings change.
Yeah.
But consistency is a choice.
Mhm.
You don't have to be perfect, you just have to not quit. Take a deep breath and try again tomorrow. If this story helped you find your motivation today, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. We are in this journey together. Keep going and keep leveling up your English.